Good to be back at St. Margaret's Church. It was 25 years ago that I last stood in this pulpit to say goodbye to all of you, thinking I might never come back. But I have. Karen and I are living in the Villages, Florida's friendliest hometown, and we've been affiliated with the Fruitland Park Parish, Holy Trinity, and they have a school next door for students with various learning disabilities, and I'm teaching a basic course on Christianity. Had a great time. It's been a wonderful experience. I've had the pleasure of meeting your former rector, Mason, and hearing about the good things that God is doing here at St. Margaret's Church. I want to begin this morning by asking you a question. Question that's been on my mind now that I'm a senior citizen, like some of you. Have you ever wondered why some people achieve fulfillment in their life, satisfaction, while others do not? Why do some feel a sense of satisfaction at the end of life's journey, while others have regrets? Some think that the difference between the two outcomes in life is due to the luck of the draw. Family you were born into, which side of the tracks you grew up on, the cards you were dealt with, or some other mysterious force working for or against you in life. But in the Bible, we are taught that the true reason for fulfillment in life is having the right attitude. How you think about yourself, the people in your life, the opportunities before you, the possibilities that God has given to you will dictate the decisions you make and how you respond to those opportunities. Now that I'm officially a senior citizen, having been retired for 6 years, I think about these things more and more, and I imagine some of you do as well. I belong to a health club in the Villages called Genesis, and it is designed for those who are starting anew in their life. I think that's why they call the facility Genesis. I like to ride the stationary bike. So on the wall, if you've ever been there, you might have seen it, on the wall above the aerobics classroom, the large aerobics classroom, is an electronic sign that says, "Success is attitude." Yesterday, there was a long line of people waiting to get in that aerobics class and waiting for it to begin, believing that their attitude towards themselves and their health would be crucial for the outcome of their lives. Everywhere in the Bible, both in the New Testament and the Old, we learn that the feeling of satisfaction about one's life comes with having the right attitude. And that right attitude is the attitude of faith. Not dwelling on your limitations or problems, but imagining what God can do in your life. How you think about yourself, the people in your life, the opportunities before you will dictate your life's destiny. You might ask yourself this morning, are you a positive person? Do you see the glass half full or half empty? Is God opening up new possibilities for you every day? Do you see them? Do you get along with other people? Are you flexible and able to make a course correction when necessary? Are you grateful for what you have, what God has already given to you, knowing that the best is yet to come? In the area of health and fitness, success comes to those who set goals and stick to them. They see opportunities where others only see a dead end. They stay in the game when they are tempted to quit and go to the sidelines. Your attitude so often determines the decisions you make at the crossroads of life. Our Old Testament lesson this morning is about a man who was faithful, persistent, and patient. He had an impossible dream, which was to become a father. He waited a long time for that to come to pass, for that to be realized. Against all odds, he held on to his dream. Despite his age, despite the age of his wife, who was nearly as old as he was. The man's name was Abraham. His example is offered to us in the Bible as a preeminent example of faith. If you don't know the story of Abraham, let me give you a brief outline. The book of Genesis tells us that Abram, as he was originally known, was a herdsman in the Middle East. His name would later be changed to Abraham, signifying that the hand of God was on him. As we read, we learn that Abraham was married. But he and his elderly wife, Sarah, never had any children. Abraham wanted more than anything to be a father. But that was not likely given his age, 75. She was nearly as old. So one day God spoke to him and called him to leave his homeland and set out to a place that would be his inheritance. The place that we know today as the land of Israel. God promised Abram that he would become a father, not just a father of a child, a son or daughter, but the father of a great nation whose descendants would be more numerous than all the stars in the sky. Pretty amazing, don't you think? Impossible, wouldn't you conclude? I mean, if God came to me, I'm the same age as Abraham. I'm 75. If God came to me and said, Father Jamie, you're going to be a father again. I have 2 beautiful daughters. Maybe you've wanted to have a son of your own. You'll be a father again, but you'll have to wait. Won't happen today or tomorrow or next year. You'll have to wait 25 years for it to happen. And I would have said, no way. You got to be kidding. Abraham learned he had to do his part. He had to put his faith into action. He had to leave his homeland, go to a foreign land, not knowing what the future would bring, but being confident in God's plan. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about having the right attitude, an attitude of faith, a faith to believe the impossible. Faith is the attitude that opens the door for God to reveal his power and his blessing in our lives. It's an attitude that leads to action, a willingness to do what God wants us to do, even when we don't know why or where we're headed. It almost always means taking a risk. For Abraham, that meant going to a foreign land, not knowing what lay ahead or how long it would take to realize his dream. With faith, you are trusting God to have the answers, even if you don't. Even when you are failing at solving your problem, you have faith, not just any kind of faith, but persistent faith. Faith that does not quit, that does not give up. It says, this is worth working for. This is worth a second effort. You're willing to put your faith into action, even when you don't know where you're going. That's what God has asked you to do. And you're confident that you will do it and God's blessings will follow. Abraham was 100 years old when that dream was realized, before he became a father. And that's a reminder to us that it's never too late for God to bless your life. It's never too late for God to do something new in your life. Never think that you're too old, but that the best years are behind you. The best years may be still ahead. The author of Hebrews tells us that Abraham never let the light of his faith go out, of that great inheritance that God promised to him, that one day would be his. The letter to Hebrews also gives us a memorable definition of faith based on this story. Do you remember how it goes? I'm going to quiz you next week on this. This is a memory verse. I want you to put it to memory so that when the time comes that you are in a jam, you can draw upon this for the strength that God will give you. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Let's say that together. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. As I mentioned before, I turned 75 this summer, which means I'm as old as Abraham. He probably looked a lot older than me. But that was when he received that promise from God, age 75. He'd have to wait 25 more years before that promise was realized, when his wife Sarah would bear a son named Isaac. And as I said before, if God told me that, I would say, no way. That's impossible. But that's just the point I'm trying to make to you this morning. With faith, you can believe the impossible in your life. As you know, the second chapter of the Gospel of Luke tells us that one day the archangel Gabriel told a young girl that she would become a mother, not just of any child, but the mother of the Son of God. Her name was Mary. We think she was just a teenager. She tells the archangel Gabriel there's just one problem with this prophecy. She says, I'm a virgin. Do you remember how Gabriel responded? With God, all things are possible. The story concludes with Mary saying, let it be unto me according to your will. She had faith to believe in a God who called her to expect the impossible in her life. In Ephesians chapter 4:23, St. Paul urges us to be renewed in the attitude of our mind. That's something that happens when we come to faith in Jesus Christ. Coming to faith in Jesus Christ is like being born again. It's a whole new start in our life that comes with a complete change in how we think, how we see the world around us, and about the possibilities that God has put before us. When you are renewed in the attitude of your mind, you look to the future with a faith that doesn't quit, that doesn't give up, that is confident in God, and willing to believe that what you know cannot possibly be true is in fact going to become true. Some people call this kind of faith foolishness. I call it persevering faith. In the 5th century AD, the Roman Empire was crumbling under the attack of German tribes. Soon Rome would fall, and with it, civilization would enter the Dark Ages and then the Middle Ages. Among those living through this time was a woman by the name of Monica. She was a committed Christian. She had a wayward son named Augustine, or Augustine. We have a city in Florida named after him. He was a wayward son who was working as a lawyer at the time, but he was living a disreputable life. She wanted more than anything for him to come to Christ. She prayed for her son for 15 years. 15 years. Nothing happened. She didn't give up. If any of you have had a child or a grandchild that you worry about, agonize over, or have prayed about, you know what this feels like. Monica kept praying, believing that God would act in her son's life. Then one day, a preacher came to town, a new bishop by the name of Ambrose. He was the Billy Graham of his time, a great preacher. Augustine heard about him and was curious, and so he went to hear him. And as a result of the sermon that day, he was solidly converted to Jesus Christ. He turned to Christ as a Savior. He would go on to become one of the great leaders of the church in the early years. As the Roman Empire collapsed, the church would hold Western civilization together, and Augustine would become one of its great leaders. And many believe that the steadfast prayers of his mother are the reason why. She had the faith to believe and not quit, not give up. The attitude of faith, that attitude is the attitude that gets results. It's an attitude that is persistent for God to act in His time, not necessarily in our time. It's the faith in a God who opens up new opportunities for us to walk in. You may be wondering why I'm talking about this so much this morning, but this is a lesson I learned when I first came here. That was 1993. I was your new rector that year. And returning back brings back a lot of memories. But back in 1993, there was a woman in the parish, long-standing member of the parish, who came up to me one day. And she said, Father Jamie, I have a vision for the ministry of this church, outreach ministry. I never thought I could do anything with it until you came. Now, I have to tell you, I gulped when I heard those words. Until you came. I didn't know what she had in mind. She went on to say she had a dream in her heart, but never thought she would get any support for it. But now she felt God was calling her to act. Some of you may remember her, Ruth Falsetti. I gulped when I heard this, because I had a different idea. I had an idea for a midweek luncheon series, Bible teaching series for those who were coming over to the church and kind of hanging out, and they looked like they were in need of some kind of an organized ministry. We had in my church in Virginia a ministry called Tuesday Luncheon. And it was a Bible teaching series, and people would come, we'd bring a bag lunch, and we would have a Bible study, essentially for adults. I wanted to do that here at St. Margaret's Church. And I talked with the vestry about it. Everybody thought, great, go ahead. Ruth thought, this is an opportunity. She came with a different vision, but a similar vision, which was to have an outreach ministry to the poor and the needy in Inverness. We merged the two ideas. That's how Feed My Sheep began. And I understand it continues to this day. It's a long time. I have to say, it got much bigger than I imagined at the outset, and more quickly than I ever thought possible. We started with about 10 or 12 people. It was a little more than a bag luncheon and a Bible study, but quickly grew to about 70. We offered a full meal to anybody who wanted to come, the poor and the needy of our community. The parish hall was filled. We had teams of people in the kitchen cooking, others serving. I brought my guitar. We had an overhead projector and a screen. I did a teaching. We did some singing. The people loved it. They lined up outside before the doors would open, eager to get in. Well, very quickly we added another day, which was Wednesday, because we had a midweek Eucharist, noontime. Following that service, we had Feed My Sheep. We had 70 more people coming. Place was packed. I would walk through the parish hall. There were all these people, I didn't even know who they were. Who are these people? Teams of people in the kitchen. So I would ask them, who are you? I'm Father Jamie. She said, oh, we're from the Methodist Church. Oh, we're from the Catholic Church. We just wanted to help out. Well, before long, the restaurants in town began giving us their overflow and extra food. We had lots of provisions. The whole community was involved. We expanded it to yet another day, Friday. The place was a madhouse every day. I'm not kidding. I would go to the hospital for visitations of people that were sick, and I would run into other clergy from around the town, people I knew from clergy meetings, and they would say, oh, Father Jamie, we're really inspired by what you're doing. How can we help? And I would always give them the same answer, take another day. And they did. And at one point, we had all 5 days covered. It was a great outreach ministry, and this church was a leading church in Inverness. The scriptures this morning assure us that if we have confident faith in God, if we persevere and are patient, the blessings we hope for in life will come. God will show us what he wants us to do. Feed my sheep is a clear example of confident faith. Faith that what one hopes for will in fact happen. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it will happen in God's time if we're willing to do what he's asked us to do, if we are patient to see results that he has planned for us. I think if we're honest, the hardest part of having faith is waiting. I am not a patient person, so I struggle with this. We don't always get the response we hope for in prayer in the time that we expect. Like Monica, we are challenged to stay with it, to not let go of that vision. Or like Ruth, she held that vision for that ministry in her heart for a long time. This is where persistence pays off. The story of Abraham is the story of a man who had the patience to wait and the persistence to wait for the blessing that would come to him in his life. He is given to us as an example of what God will do in our lives. Faith is the assurance of things we have hoped for, the convictions of things we cannot see as being true. Faith opens the door for God to act in our lives, and so it is an attitude that is put into action, thankful for what God has already done, with patient conviction that the best is yet to come. For those of us back in 1993 here at St. Margaret's Church, with the beginning of a new ministry, the time was right to propose a new outreach to the community. That might happen again. You may find that this interim, or what they call transition ministry, is a great time to try out new ideas. I encourage you to do that. It's a time to discern God's leading for the future. Even if it means having to wait for all the pieces to come together. I say go for it. You don't have to have all the answers today. God will give them to you tomorrow. Just be willing to step out and step forward. Be patient. God will take care of the details. Abraham had to wait patiently. He'd been waiting all of his life to become a father. He was in his 70s when he received the promise from God that his descendants would be more numerous than the stars in the sky. And he was over 100 years old when that promise was fulfilled. For him, the time would be right when the fulfillment of his dream would be a miracle of God for all the world to see. So I began this morning by asking you, what's the difference between those who feel a sense of satisfaction in life, who have reached their goals, who realize their destiny and their dreams? I agree with what the scriptures teach. It gets back to your attitude of faith. Persistent faith in a God who can do the impossible, a God who wants to bless you, a God who knows your needs, a God who will help you find what you are seeking for in life and open up doors of opportunity for you. A faith that says, Lord, I am thankful for what you've already done in my life. I'm ready to look to the future to take action. I will do what you ask, knowing that you will help me reach the land of my inheritance. God may be calling you to step up and be a leader in this church. He may be calling you to be a leader in the community. God is waiting to do wonderful, amazing things in this church and beyond. So if you feel called but remain uncertain whether to step forward, remember these words from the letter to the Hebrews. Do you remember them? Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.